I'm Jay Arnold, Deputy Mayor of Kirkland. On behalf of the entire Kirkland City Council, I'd like to welcome you. The City of Kirkland strives to be a green, sustainable, vibrant community and is proud to be a co-sponsor of tonight's performance, along with Kirkland Interfaith Network. On this Earth Day, we invite you to take a moment to contemplate the challenge ahead with our planet and its climate. The concert is free, but we hope you are inspired to click the tip button during the performance. Money raised will go to the Green Kirkland Partnership and the Nature Conservancy's Plant a Billion Trees Fund. If you are further inspired after the concert, please visit our Earth Month page at kirklandwa.gov/Earth Month to learn about more ways you could take action and volunteer in the community. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Welcome to a live stream concert from the Royal Room in Seattle, Washington. Before we get started, I want to introduce this fabulous band on the stage with me. We have Cliff Swiggett on trombone, Julian Smedley on violin, Adam Kessler on drums, Chris Seimer on bass, our lovely engineer Brad, the only other person in the room with us in the background. Yay! And I'm Nelda Swiggett, and we're going to be performing the Alaska Suite, a story of beauty, loss, and hope. So my brother-in-law, Tor, is a permafrost expert and lives in Fairbanks, Alaska. He first suggested to me that I compose music inspired by Alaska, and more specifically, climate change in Alaska. He explained, Alaska is our canary in the coal mine. So why is Alaska an early signal of danger ahead for all of us? I'm going to share about why. But first, I want to tell you about my trip to Alaska. When Tor and I spoke, my husband and I were on our way to spend a week on the north slope of the Arctic Wildlife Refuge with my sister Janet about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We drove north out of Fairbanks, up the Dalton Highway, over the Yukon River and into immense wilderness. We traveled 350 miles on gravel road to a remote outpost at Galbraith Lake, where we found ourselves tucked between the peaks of the Brooks Range to the south and vast tundra gently rolling 150 miles north to the Arctic Ocean. We saw spectacular mountains stretching to the far horizon and wide glacial-carved valleys with braided rivers. We struggled through deep, spongy tundra, thick with vibrant lichens and mosses on top of frozen ground. Later, I camped and hiked in Mount Denali National Park by myself. I saw moose with big racks standing in lakes and feeding on grasses. I faced off with a small herd of caribou on a mountainside. I saw a rare wolf run across the road. Many grizzlies from the safety of the tourist bus. Lots of Arctic ground squirrels, Dall sheep, a wolverine. I was lucky to see Mount Denali when the clouds parted and it rose majestically over 20,000 feet high. After skinny dipping in a frigid lake, I heard the wind whispering in the branches of the aspen trees. And that's when I committed to composing the Alaska Suite. Alaska is beautiful and wild, home to caribou and polar bears, sparsely populated and mostly untouched. But here are some troubling facts. In a normal winter, sea ice piles high along the coastlines of Alaska's northern Bering Sea. In March 2019, the Bering Strait was almost completely open water. Scientists say these changed ocean conditions were projected by climate models, but not until 2050. That summer, high temperatures smashed all-time records across the state of Alaska. In July, Anchorage reached an astonishing 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The average temperature in Anchorage during the summer is normally in the mid-60s. Scientists typically consider a normal temperature to be the long-term average over a 30-year period. Positive departures from normal in Alaska have been unprecedented in recent years. The fact is, atmospheric CO2 levels, or greenhouse gases, have increased by more than 40% since the start of the Industrial Revolution and are warming our planet. 19 of the world's hottest years on record have all occurred since 2000. The top 7 hottest were the past 7 years. 2020 tied with 2016 as the hottest year ever. The trend is clear. But here's the deal. While the Earth has warmed on average about 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit since 1880, the Arctic is warming more than twice as fast as the global average. And that's why Alaska is our canary in the coal mine. Perhaps you're not aware that climate change has impacted you personally, living here in the Pacific Northwest. But the impacts of climate change are extreme and alarming in Alaska right now, and that should be a wake-up call for all of us. It's melting in Alaska, persistently, unstoppably. We're witnessing the fastest decline in Arctic sea ice in at least 1,500 years. And the future is crazily uncertain for the polar bears, seals, walruses, birds, Alaskan natives, and more who depend on the sea ice for their survival. Alaska is home to some of the largest glaciers on Earth, and there are more than 100,000 of them. Alaska is also home to the fastest loss of glacier ice on Earth. Retreating glaciers in Alaska and British Columbia contribute about 40 to 70 gigatons of surplus fresh water to the oceans every year. Even if warming stopped now, glaciers would continue melting for years or decades to come. Half of the land in Alaska is underlain by permafrost, a permanently frozen layer of soil, rocks, and frozen water. Near the Arctic Circle, the ground is frozen sometimes as deep as 2,000 feet. But thaw has begun. Once secure forests are sinking drunkenly into thaw lakes and bogs. The ground is slumping and vegetation patterns are changing. Walls of ice are collapsing into the ocean. Alaska's wildlife and human life are struggling to adapt if they can. Normally, snow and ice cool the Earth's surface by reflecting a lot of the sun's energy back up into the atmosphere. When warming temperatures melt snow and ice, darker regions are exposed, which absorb more heat, like a dark shirt does on a hot, sunny day. This is one of the primary reasons the Arctic is warming so rapidly. When sea ice melts, dark water absorbs more of the sun's energy, and the warmer ocean melts even more sea ice. As ocean temperatures rise, the warmer seawater expands. This, combined with added water from melting land ice, raised global sea levels about 7.5 inches between 1901 and 2010. Permafrost is packed with dead plant life. Permafrost soils throughout the entire Arctic contain almost twice as much carbon as our atmosphere. When these organic-rich soils warm and thaw, they start to decompose and release carbon into the atmosphere. When permafrost melts to form lakes and bogs, these soils decompose underwater without oxygen and release methane, a greenhouse gas 20 to 25 times more potent than CO2. So as the atmosphere warms, permafrost melts, which releases greenhouse gas, which further warms the atmosphere, which speeds up the permafrost melting, and so on. When I arrived in Alaska in the middle of August, the sky was hazy, and I could smell heavy smoke in the air from burning forests. Forest fires are a natural part of the boreal forest ecosystem, but warmer, drier summers are making Alaska significantly more prone to forest fires. And because of Alaska's hotter summers, there are tens of thousands of lightning strikes across the state to help ignite them. The fact is, Alaska wildfires have increased dramatically in number and size since 1990. The Alaskan tundra has been too cold and wet to support extensive fires for thousands of years, but now the tundra is burning too. Of course, burning emits more heat-trapping gases, which cause higher temperatures, which cause even more fires, and so on and so on. Oceans absorb 26% of the carbon dioxide we emit. This CO2 interacts with ocean water to form carbonic acid. The polar ocean is particularly prone to ocean acidification because of its low temperature as well as low salt content, with fresh water coming from melting sea and land ice. Acidity makes it harder for tiny plankton and shelled animals to form and maintain their shells and skeletons. And this diminishes the food available for important fish species, like Alaska's pink salmon. At a critical threshold, rising acidity will significantly harm Alaska's sea life and its commercial and subsistence fisheries. Alaskans are on the front lines of climate change. With less sea ice, storms are brewing bigger waves at sea and fiercely eroding coastlines. Villages on Alaska's western shores are flooding and washing away. The Arctic guillemots of Cooper Island, Alaska, are struggling to adapt to a melting Arctic. With warming temperatures, subarctic horned puffins expanded their range northward to the island and stole the guillemots' nests. Hungry polar bears found refuge on Cooper Island too, as their regular hunting grounds, the sea ice, retreated. In 2009, puffins and polar bears together killed 80% of the guillemots' chicks. Now many guillemots' nestlings are simply starving. Rising ocean temperatures have reduced fish populations, and parent guillemots are unable to feed their young. These are just a few of Alaska's climate refugees, uprooted, distressed, homeless. So climate change is already wreaking havoc in Alaska. But Alaska is not only our canary in the coal mine. The narrowing temperature difference between the Arctic and the equator is increasingly disrupting the jet stream. That means weather in the middle latitudes of North America, Europe, and Asia can get stuck. Rains can grow into floods, more intense winter storms, hurricanes. Sunny days can turn into heat waves and droughts. Tender, dry conditions can become ravaging wildfires. In the Florida Keys, climate migration has begun. Coastal homes, wrecked or not, are starting to be bulldozed to clear a path for rising sea levels. Besides human suffering, the economic cost of these extreme weather events is staggering. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, in 2017, 3 hurricanes alone, Harvey, Irma, and Maria, together cost the United States at least $265 billion. These extremes are only going to get worse. Let's make this really tangible. What's climate change doing right here, right now in the Pacific Northwest? Well, just like in Alaska, the Northwest is melting. In the past few decades, almost every mountain glacier here has retreated substantially or even entirely vanished. Mount Rainier has lost about 14.5 square miles of snow and ice over the last century, and the rate of loss is accelerating. Just like Alaska, we're starting to have more frequent, abnormally warm years as the Earth heats up. Both 2005 and 2015 were unusually warm with an extremely low snowpack. Most of the wintertime precipitation in the mountains fell as rain rather than snow. This trend is bad news because we depend on a healthy winter snowpack to feed our rivers and reservoirs during the late spring and summer when there isn't much rain. More rain on snow events creates swollen rivers that damage access to recreation areas. It can take many years to repair the damage. Just like in Alaska, our seawater is warming and acidifying. In Willapa Bay, commercial oyster larvae are now shipped to Hawaii to grow because there's too much CO2 in the bay water for them to thrive until they get more mature. In many years, we now have summertime blooms of algae and dead zones. Every few years, there are salmon die-offs as they try to migrate up rivers that are too warm for them. That's bad news for our endangered orcas who rely on salmon for food. Just like in Alaska, the Northwest is drying out, and every summer the wildfire season seems to become more and more alarming. We now have roughly twice as much acreage burned per year on average than in the 1970s. Is unhealthy, heavy, smoky air the new normal for our summers in the Northwest? In 2018, the Seattle area set a record of 32 days that reached at least 85 degrees, well above the average of about 11. Over the last century, the average annual temperature in the Northwest has risen by about 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures here are projected to increase anywhere from 3 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit by 2100. What will our mountains, forests, and waters, our homes and livelihoods look like then? I'm worried, and I hope you are too.
Miss is hard to predict because all the natural world is still present, is with us, like a second skin that's far more lush and mysterious than our own. Like sweet, pure air we take for granted as we move through this world's great beauty, no longer knowing how it felt before we had words to name, before we took our first breath, or felt our first clear, icy water on bare toes, or glimpsed our mother's eyes for the first time, or spotted the rainbow hues of flowers as they bloomed and thrived with the touch of bees' feet on petals, the light brush of wings. We were like the dolphin, coursing through waves as its flippers push and curl. What can a swan know about the water it paddles, or the hummingbird's sense about the way its wings tap a staccato on air? What divides us now but the electric impulses of our brains that name, that think, that judge? We are too separate. We face the irrecoverable ruin of our only paradise. If we could go back, could it connect us again so deeply to what we were and can be, to the full embrace of being in the sensory world, that all the actions that began our isolation would cease, would become impossible? We grieve, we strive for answers, make goals, then relapse into comforts and denial. We create stories that allow us to escape consequences, pretending we're immune, since climate impacts are mostly far away. But we are surging ever closer, caught in our human-made current of no return. What will we say to our children's children as they seek to understand why we knew and still turned away?
I want to thank my good friend Jill McGrath, who composed the poem you just heard, In Our Future, for the Alaska Suite. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is an independent panel of hundreds of the world's leading climate scientists from nations on every continent. Their report in 2018 concluded that to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, we must stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. To achieve this goal, humanity needs to cut its current emission rate roughly in half by 2030. By 2050, we must cut to net zero. China now leads the world in total global emissions, but per capita, the US takes the lead, with 16 tons emitted per person in 2019 versus China with 7.1 tons per person, or India 1.9. The truth is, what we do in the United States has a huge impact on future greenhouse gas emissions. What we do really matters, and what you do individually really matters. Transportation accounts for about 1/3 of US carbon emissions. Over half of these emissions come from passenger cars, sport utility vehicles, pickup trucks, and minivans. On average, a single American driver pours 6 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere every year. What's one of the most impactful things you can do for our planet? Drive less. Drive a more fuel-efficient car. Thinking about getting a different car? Go electric. Heating and cooling our homes is typically the second biggest offender for individuals. Lower the thermostat and put on a sweater. Turn down the heat at night and when you're not home. Make sure your home is well insulated. These are all easy things to do that will save you money and have significant impact. Wean yourself off red meat. According to one Danish study, the average cow produces enough methane per year to do the same greenhouse damage as 4 tons of CO2. One round-trip flight from Seattle to New York creates a warming effect equivalent to 2 or 3 tons of CO2 per person. Among high-impact choices, fly less. And before you buy carbon offsets, do your research. Many carbon offsets don't actually reduce emissions. Looking at the big picture, there are lots of reasons to be hopeful. The evolution of clean energy technologies are surpassing expectations and rapidly dropping in price. Ongoing efforts to plant billions of trees and innovations in agriculture have enormous potential to sequester carbon emissions. Nuclear power plants produce virtually no greenhouse gas emissions or any pollutants. After analyzing the risks and latest reactor technology, many environmentalists now believe nuclear power is a reliable and important part of the solution. St. Louis, Missouri currently gets about 75% of its electricity from coal plants. The city voted to obtain 100% of its energy from renewable sources by 2035. St. Louis is just one of 170 US cities that have committed to a 100% clean energy goal. Washington is one of 19 US states with targets to achieve statewide 100% clean electricity. Nobel Prize winning economists, industry leaders, and politicians on both sides of the aisle recognize that climate change must transcend politics and are advocating for strong national climate legislation. This includes our Department of Defense, which recognizes the effects of a changing climate threaten our national security. Our new administration recognizes that we need to act now. Just today, on Earth Day 2021, the United States vowed to reduce its greenhouse gases by at least 50% by 2030. Individuals and organizations around the globe acknowledge the realities of climate change and are taking direct action in myriad ways to address it. I'm optimistic. We are moving toward a clean energy future, and it's an exciting time for ingenuity, creativity, and collaboration. Believing in climate change isn't enough. And politicians promising to cut emissions isn't enough. If we want to pass a livable planet on to our children, individuals like us need to work side by side with our politicians and businesses, our scientists and engineers, our neighbors, to be the example of change, even when it's hard, and to hold ourselves accountable. We're in this together, and we can address the problem together. Well, normally this is the time during the concert of the Alaska Suite that we hand out little pieces of paper and a pencil or a pen and actually ask something of you, our audience. But since you're not in the room with us today, we're going to do a slightly different or a very different version of this part of the program. My request is that you find a piece of paper and a pencil in your own home and that you write down on this paper something that you have done, could do, or will do to address climate change in your life. And this is voluntary and obviously anonymous. But if you are feeling like you would like to share your thoughts and ideas, which would be fabulous, my request would be that you actually type your thoughts into the chat box wherever you're watching this show from, so that because we find that what happens in a normal concert is that people, we collect these little pieces of paper, and then Cliff and Julian read them out loud with no names, and it's always one of a really uplifting part of the program, frankly, to hear all about the incredible things that you are already doing to make a difference on the planet, and then also, you know, your aspirations. So I hope that some of you will share in the chat box for others to be inspired, that we inspire each other. So, and I just always say that I try really hard not to judge other people about the choices they make. We all have different constraints on what we can do to example, lower our carbon footprint or make a difference. But I know you, of course, can judge yourself. So do what you think you can do. And what you see, if you're looking at the image on the screen right now, you're actually seeing this. This was made at some point by Cliff, my husband, and it's a collection of a lot of the ideas that people have shared at Alaska Suite performances. And the ones that what do you call this, a word cloud? The ones that are bigger were more common than the little ones. So anyway, you might get some ideas there. So we're going to finish with our last piece of the program. This is called First Flight. Well, from your home, big round of applause for Cliff Swiggett on trombone, Julian Smedley on violin, Adam Kessler on drums, Chris Seimer on bass. I'm Nelda Swiggett, and I just wanted to give a few thank yous at the end here. I wanted to thank the great people who brought this concert to your home tonight. That includes Brady Harvey and Nicholas Palomenakos from Loudswell, also Wayne Horvitz from the Royal Room, and also Brad Ruda, the sound and video engineer. Again, I'm really happy to have him helping us out tonight. And then also, I definitely want to thank our wonderful sponsors, the City of Kirkland and the Kirkland Interfaith Network, including especially Sharon Sherrard and also extra specially Margaret Schwender, who made it her mission to bring the Alaska Suite to Kirkland. And unfortunately, our live concert was canceled because of the pandemic last spring, and she worked tirelessly to figure out how to still bring this concert to Kirkland. And I know many of you are not from Kirkland who were invited to attend tonight, but we are so grateful to be supported by the Kirkland community and hopefully raising some funds to support some good work that they care about as well. And so thank you, Margaret. And so and thank you all for watching, and good night.
Thank you for joining tonight's special performance. From scientific projections, we have approximately 10 years to convert our energy supply to clean, renewable resources in order to prevent the worst effects of climate change. We have vast work ahead in order to replace fossil fuels in our transportation sector, to build buildings so that they more efficiently use energy, to protect our natural resources, and to reduce waste. We are seeing negative impacts of climate change already every year. It can all seem so daunting, so difficult, so hard. But the art and music of tonight inspires. We are inspired by the energy and passion of people in the community working towards sustainability. We are inspired by many people doing little things that together can become something big. We are inspired by new technology and ideas turning into solutions. We are inspired by the opportunities to work for environmental justice, correcting past wrongs as we work towards a sustainable future. We are inspired by our youth, whose very future we are fighting for. If you are inspired to action as well, please visit kirklandwa.gov/Earth Month for sustainable actions you can take to combat climate change in Kirkland. Thank you and good night.